Welcome back to another edition of the Night Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me is my co-host, Richie O'Leary, and we will talk about that more in a second. We also have a very special guest, the president of the Knights of Raritan NIL Collective, John Newman, will be joining us shortly. But first, we got to talk about our presenting sponsor, Night and Day Apparel. Calling all Rutgers fans, students, and alumni. Are you looking for some new and unique Rutgers merchandise? Rutgers Night and Day Apparel has you covered. From t-shirts to hoodies to drinkware and pet accessories, Night and Day focuses on providing the Rutgers community with exclusive one-of-a-kind tailgating products. So be sure to check out the links in today's podcast description to their website and social media so you can stay on top of everything Night and Day, including new merch drops and promotional announcements. Shop now and stay chopping. And keep chopping, sorry. This is a Night and Day shirt. Just wanted to show it off. It's one of my favorites. So again, I am not just BSing when I say I actually really like their stuff. We are also brought to you by the Cut app. The Cut app is a peer-to-peer social betting platform that's legal now in 40 plus states. Cut has customizable odds, tracking ability, and entire social network with group chats, user profiles, and rewards. All payments, no need for Venmo. Our promo code is Believe Rutgers. You get 10%. You get a 10% welcome bonus if you use our deposit code. So yeah, check that out. I haven't downloaded it yet, but I plan on doing it just to see what it's all about, because I've heard this on a bunch of pods, and Believe has hooked us up with this sponsor as well. Yeah. So Rich, I talked about Richie O'Leary. You changed your name. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so officially got approved the other day from the legal process. I will say this, whoever has to ever go through that is miserable.
AKA women when they get married.
Yeah, no, but that's a lot easier when you get married. It's very simple, because my mom changed it too as well. It was both my sisters and I and my mom. We all changed it to reflect our stepdad's last name. He's been in our family for nearly 20 years now. That's more than half my life, so... we made the decision. We were going to do it a couple years ago, kind of just wait it, and then college paperwork and this and student loans and all that get in the way, and it's very hard to change all that stuff at the time. So now that a little bit down the line, was able to do it, and it's officially Richie O'Leary. So really perfect timing too, honestly, in terms of St. Patty's Day right around the corner.
No, I was going to say, you must have timed it up. You must have not wanted to miss out on St. Patty's Day as an O'Leary.
No, of course not.
So yeah, if you're listening to this pod and you're hearing it for the first time, it's going to be hard for me to not spit out Richie Schneiderite either. Yeah. But I'll get used to it. But congratulations, Rich. I know we've talked privately about this, and I'm glad that you were able to finally get that situation settled, because I know you've wanted to do it for a while. Yeah,
just happy to get it over and done with. So it is it's official.
All right. Now, without further ado, we are going to start our conversation with Knights of the Raritan President John Newman. Joining the show now is Knights of the Raritan President John Newman. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate being on.
Now, obviously, we wanted to have you on because Knights of the Raritan has announced arguably the most ambitious NIL collective benefit in all of college sports. Talk us through the process of developing the idea for the Scarlet Ticket and some of the response you guys have seen so far.
So we, and as you all know, once a year, maybe twice a year, we try to do something big, especially to drive memberships. And after doing this for a couple of years, we've sort of learned what moves the needle and what doesn't. And big time experiences really move the needle, as well as match campaigns. People love to give $1 and have somebody else match that dollar, so giving $1 equals $2.
Yep.
So, we've done the $1 million match, and we're like, what could be the thing that would really move the needle, get people excited, and give people access that they don't normally have? And especially given the anticipated success of football next year after the bowl year, I think there are two really big high school basketball players
who are they?
What are their names? So anyway, so with Ace Bailey, Dylan Harper, the rest of the crew coming in next year, it's hard to get a basketball ticket, period.
Yes.
So having basketball tickets involved. And then Coquise Washington has a couple of high-level recruits coming in, and Goody always does a really good job with wrestling. That's a relatively young team. We're like, what if we bundled all of that together and offered that as a premium benefit? So the tickets aren't only football tickets, but they're up in the club. The basketball tickets are, the best we could go is 200 level, but we're going to have pre-game hospitality with that as well. And then the wrestling and women's basketball are 100 level, and we're getting parking included, but we're not sure exactly where that is yet. And then as we did this, I got a text from Brian Breck saying, hey, we'll throw in men's lacrosse tickets too. So
Wow.
it's building up that momentum. So you have 5 opportunities for season tickets all of next year for those 5 sports. And we figured if that wasn't going to move the needle to get people excited and at least give people the opportunity to enter something for that prize, nothing would. And so that's the offer. And depending on what level member you are, you get more entries in the sweepstakes. And one person will win the Scarlet Ticket, which is 2 tickets to all of those sports next year. Should be really exciting.
Yeah,
And-
that sounds awesome.
And when do people have to enter by, and when does the date for the announcement happen?
So our deadline is March 10th, so it's another 10 days or so. And then we're going to announce probably in late May, early June is the current time frame. We want to make sure that we have enough time to do all the math because, if you're a 500 a month member, and we have some of those, they get 50 entries, and we have to make sure the database is fine and, people are comfortable with the process. And we're trying to figure out a fun way to announce it. We may get some former players involved or do something a little surprise-like, but stay tuned on that.
Yeah, that
Awesome.
sounds awesome. Now, I don't want to take away from the Scarlet Ticket too much, but I do want to look back a little bit. It's been almost 2 years since you guys have launched.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of just inspired you guys and others on the committee to just kind of start this whole thing, I guess? Was it just NIL?
So, yeah, and it goes back to when Danny Breslauer and I were doing a podcast, and that was right around the time that all of this was getting started, right? That's when Gio was making his push. There was a lot of talk in college athletics about this. We actually, with the Scarlet Spotlight, did the first ever NIL deal at Rutgers. We actually hired Gio and Isaiah Pacheco to do interviews with us and paid them for it. And it was very clear that NIL was coming, and we as a school, I've been involved as a student, and even before that, for more than 50 years, we always seem to be behind the curve on new stuff like
Yep.
this.
Yep.
And we knew going in that Rutgers had an interesting history as far as raising money anyway. So we got a group together of about 12, 14 people. We did Zoom meetings, and we said, is this something we want to do? We had seen the beginning of collectives. Florida State had started. There were a couple of others. And we decided, okay, we're going to try this. We're going to try and get ahead of it and do the best we can because we didn't want to be left behind. And it was interesting. We were a little bit ahead of the curve. I remember talking to people within the athletic department with the teams, and they hadn't really seen it yet. And the evolution over the 2 years has been amazing and frightening at the same time because you see how quickly this has grown, and now it's even at the point where we've had conversations with Olympic sport coaches recently where a year ago they weren't really concerned about this, and now it's become one of the most important things that they're dealing with even at the Olympic sport level.
Yeah, so I kind of want to talk about the buy-in from both fans and from the athletic department. Was there some? Were people kind of hesitant to jump on board with the NIL collective when you guys started it? And has that relationship between fans and the administration gotten better over the years?
So let's take the fan side first. I think
Sure.
that with anything new, there's hesitancy. Again, Rutgers has a long history of wanting to do things the right way, the fan base in particular. I was there back 50 years ago when it was let's talk about going big time. And there were still the people that wanted to play Colgate and Lafayette every week as opposed to playing Florida and Alabama, right? And I lived through that. I was in school at that time. It was also the time of, are we going to go and stay with Penn State and try to develop football, or were we going to take the invitation to go to the Big East, which we decided not to do. We stayed with Penn State. You can argue whether that was good or not as well. So there's a lot of that. And I think with NIL, it was, even with the fan base, it was like, oh, why are we going to pay the players? You know, they're already getting paid a lot of money. There's a certain percentage of the fan base that still, you know, we don't think this is something that we should be involved with. I think that's evolved over the last 2 years, and people are seeing from a competitive standpoint that this is where things are going, and in order to stay competitive, you need to do that. But there's still a hesitancy with that. You know, as far as the athletic department is concerned, Rutgers always has been, in a good way, conservative and playing by the rules. I think our history of scandal in the early 2000s sort of taught us some lessons about that. And I think there's an appetite to be as rule following as possible and to stay by the NCAA guidelines with us. And I think that has been consistent from when we started till today. Now, we're all wondering what's going to happen, especially given what happened last week in Tennessee, where the judge pretty much said, you know, at least in our mind, there are no rules anymore. But I think that until at least the NCAA, or whatever the governing body is, says, okay, we're going to change the guidelines, you guys are going to be able to collaborate more, you guys are going to be able to go solicit more. I think Rutgers is always going to be more conservative than you know, other schools in the Big Ten, obviously other schools in the SEC, and the general consensus of where schools are. Some are more conservative, some are very aggressive, some of them have their staffs and athletic directors out there hand in hand with the collectives, some of them don't. And Rutgers has always been more on the conservative side. We try to work through that as best we can. We would love if we could work more together, especially promoting what we're doing to a larger percentage of the fan base. You know, right now, we do our best to do interviews like this, to get earned media. We do our best to promote on social media and on the fan boards and on all those places. You know, we are limited in direct access to broader audiences that maybe aren't on social media or aren't on the fan boards. You know, we'd love to have access to, you know, email lists and all that kind of stuff. And right now, we have to work through Rutgers on that. And you know, and I think there are a lot of people that applaud them for being as conservative as they are, because you really don't know where this is going on a day-to-day basis.
So you mentioned that ruling down in Tennessee. Can you kind of break it down from your perspective, what you think it looks like and how it kind of affects the future of NIL?
I mean, right now, and we've been pretty consistent from day one, it is not our role as Knights of the Raritan and the collective to contact players directly, whether they're high school players or players in the portal. Other schools and other collectives obviously haven't followed that. And in Tennessee, the NCAA was about to put the hammer down on University of Tennessee in one particular case. The attorneys general of Tennessee and my state, Virginia, went and asked for an injunction there, and that was granted by a judge in Tennessee. Surprise. And he basically said, there are no rules. Collectives can legally, until there's a final ruling, contact players and do deals directly with players. So that is a major change. He basically said the NCAA right now doesn't have the power to do anything. That's one of a series of rulings against the NCAA across the board. So you have to wonder what their future is like. But today, collectives can reach out to high school players and offer them deals, and I guess work together with coaches on teams to do that before they enroll, so they can entice them to go to their school, as opposed to the way we work it, where we don't get involved until the player is already on campus and enrolled.
So you're not going to get involved with the potential 5-man transfer to Phil Cliff's role for next year? Just making sure, because I know fans are curious.
And that's a good point. Let me explain how we work, because people, I think, even though I try to explain it on the board, sometimes don't understand it. We work directly with the coaches and their staffs, and we let them know how much money we have allocated for their sport. They then have that money and whatever other money they have, and there is other money out there, it's not only through us, and they manage that like a budget, almost like a salary cap, and it's their decision on how they want to spend that money. So they will come to us and say, here's our roster, this is how much money you have for us, these are the deals that we would like to do with you, and this is how we want to apportion it. They know better than we do. They have the direct conversations with players, either existing players or players that have enrolled, or conversations with especially transfer portal players on what is available to them. And they know that much better than we do. Our feeling is, number one, we never wanted to get involved in that at all. And two, who are we to assume that if we give X amount of money, that that's really what the coaches want? So working with coaches and staffs is really important, because, you know, in a weird way, we don't want to mess anything up either, right? Sure. I mean, the worst thing that would happen is if we got involved and we mess something up, and then we get blamed for it, or it's something the coaches don't want. We go after a player that really is not something that the coach or the staff want. So that conversation, working directly with staffs, is really important. And I think a lot of folks just don't understand that dynamic, and it's important for them to understand that dynamic.
I think something you said is very illuminating for the whole discussion. I think a lot of people assume that Knights of the Raritan, the only way that college athletes get money at Rutgers, and in reality, there are other pools of NIL that have come through that don't go through Knights of the Raritan. And really, coaches are the only ones who truly know, for the most part, how much money is available to them to spend, because they have, their, go-to donors. I mean, you could just look at like how the past worked with like whose names are on the buildings. Those guys are still donating. It might not be towards facilities anymore. It might be towards NIL efforts if the coaches could convince them to do that. So I think that's really important for people to understand that the coaches have the best idea of how much money is available to their specific program. It's not necessarily Knights of the Raritan.
Yeah, they are, and we always call them sort of the CEO of their program. It's like you're running a company, you know what your budget is for salaries, and that's the world we are heading to. With for-profit companies, you have ways to earn that money. In this case, you have to, like you said, those coaches now are being put in a position where, aside from coaching the team, recruiting the players, managing the day-to-day, they're having to go out and ask for another pool of money on top of things like facilities, or in this day and age, especially with some of the teams, the Olympic teams, the Alston money that people can now earn in exchange for staying in good graces. From a grade standpoint, that's new money that's not budgeted. A lot of coaches are going after money for that. I know you've talked to Pat about that in the past. So this is yet another thing that they have to raise money for, and they are being put in the position of making the choice between, do I want to improve facilities? Do I want to raise Alston money? Do I want to do what the athletic department has done historically, raise money for scholarships, or do I need to raise money for NIL? And making the decision for their sport, what is the most important thing? And what we're hearing across the board, and we heard it first, obviously, from football and men's basketball, and now we're hearing from Olympic sports, is NIL, depending on the sport, is now becoming the most important thing for the lion's share of all the coaches at Rutgers.
So a lot of this just feels so unsustainable. Like, I'm sure you guys have experienced the donor fatigue already. Like, you see how many coaches are leaving college sports because it's too difficult to continue on. They're going to the professional ranks, where at least they have some rule structures. They know how much players are making. They know what they can spend. Do you see something like a professional model being instituted in college sports in the near future? Where do you see the future of college sports?
So, and I'm still primarily a fan that just happens to be involved in NIL. So anything I say now is more my opinion than based on a lot of fact. But I think, and this is going to disappoint a lot of people, especially the people that I read on your board and other places who feel like, college sports is, and the way they loved it and know it, the purity of it is ended and they're never going to be a fan again. I really think that within the next couple of years, this is all going to professional collective bargaining, whether the players eventually become employees or not. In order to do collective bargaining, they would have to, but some sort of model like that where there will be a base salary that a certain percentage of the players or the student athletes will get. The question is going to be, is that every sport or is it a certain percentage of sports? And the NCAA head, Charlie Baker, his proposal said you need to have half your players on payroll, in essence, in order to reach that highest level of participation. The issue there is because of football, you have, you're going to have to make sure because of Title IX that the same number of players under contract, male players under contract and female players under contract have to be equitable. So that's going to be interesting for some men's sports because of football and the amount of scholarships and players that would have to be paid. But if you're able to do that for all your student athletes, and if you can do the math, it's a lot of money, depending on what that minimum salary is, right? I think then you're going to have a base salary that is going to be there. I do think NIL in some form will continue because that's where the bonuses are going to come from, right? You still have the ability to make money on top of that base salary. There's still name, image, and likeness. Whether collectives are involved at that point, I don't know, because I think at some point somebody's going to say, schools, you can go and start your own NIL departments. You can make it an extension of your athletic department, of your marketing department. So in that world, Rutgers Sports Properties or other people or organizations like that will be able to go to their sponsors and say, in addition to sponsoring, putting up ads or billboards or stuff like that, or sponsoring events, let's carve out a certain percentage where you can use student athletes in commercials. And, theoretically they could do that today, although Rutgers Sports Properties is not allowed to ask that right now. That's across the line. But at some point, they could theoretically build in NIL deals within their marketing deals as a way and solicit companies that way. Right now, they are not allowed to do that. We can do that, but they are not allowed to do that. But at some point, you're going to see, and you've sort of seen this at other schools already. Some of them are saying, the heck with it, there are no rules, we're going to do that already. But I think that's where it's going to go. And the NIL would be on top of the base salary, and then it would go from there.
Yeah, I thought it makes too much sense to not have Dylan or Ace on some Jersey Mike's commercials next year. Just with
nothing is stopping Jersey Mike's from doing that. Sure. They just can't do it through Rutgers. They can go directly to the player, and that's the other thing people don't understand, right? We are a conduit for that kind of stuff. We have a partner, Student Athletes NIL, that handles all the contracts, all of the money, does the deals, facilitates events, facilitates those advertisements. But and this is my executive committee is going to hate me for saying this. People don't have to come to us in order to do that. They can go directly to the player as long as the deal that they put together is blessed by compliance at Rutgers, as long as they have contracts and all that kind of stuff. They can go directly to the player and say, we would like to do the deal with you, and then it's up to the player and the player's representation to handle all that. They have to get that blessed by compliance. So nothing stops Jersey Mike's, for example. You saw the deal with Provident. They're a existing sponsor of Rutgers Sports right now, not Provident, Prudential, but they did, it looks like, it's hard to tell from that, from the press release they put out, but it looks like they did the deal with Rutgers, but then they went directly to players to do the NIL portion of that, because theoretically Rutgers was not allowed to facilitate that.
Now being down the street in New York City, obviously, what, an hour away, maybe less.
Right.
Well, traffic-wise, probably more, but besides that point, do you think it's worth it for more New York City companies to get involved in with Rutgers NIL and stuff like that?
We would love that. And this has always been the thing. I mean, you guys have seen it. How many times on your boards does somebody say, oh, we're between New York and Philadelphia, number one and number four markets. Rutgers should be raking in the money from a marketing. So forget about NIL. It was always the marketing standpoint. We should have, all these New York firms should be sponsors at JMA or SHI Stadium. The truth is, we are in probably the most competitive markets because of all the professional sports.
Yep.
And until we as a brand can really break through. So when football was hot in, '06, everybody glommed onto that, right? And that's when you have those opportunities to do that. Theoretically, when, the Wonder Twins come next year and, I like to call it when the circus comes to town. When the circus comes to town next year and, you cannot breathe in that building. And, now is the time to get those companies excited, because I remember in '06, football was on the back page of the New York sports sections. That's when that is what the time to go after those companies and strike while the iron's hot. The smart ones, and we've seen a little bit of this already, have gotten involved with those kids from an NIL perspective. So now would be the time to get involved because theoretically you can do those deals a little bit less expensive than maybe next year. So the short answer to your question, Richie, is yes, but history dictates it takes like a seismic event to get those companies to pay attention. What I would like to see, quite frankly, is some of the New Jersey companies that you think would be a no-brainer to get involved, or companies that have decided to abandon Rutgers, Johnson & Johnson, from a marketing standpoint. Now is the time to get them back involved. Not only from an NIL perspective, we would love that, and my email address is on your website, so if they want to find me, they can.
There you go.
But I would love them to get back involved with Rutgers, because they could also get in a little before the curve, and then they all like to take credit for, of course, sponsoring this hot team and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're so right about the competitive market, because think about yourself as a sports fan. Say the Knicks are terrible and it's March and you don't know what to do as a sports fan. You're thinking, okay, the Yankees are supposed to be good this year. I'm going to listen to more podcasts about the Yankees. I'm going to read more about them. I'm going to watch their spring training games. Like, there's always something else to focus your attention on.
Nebraska has Nebraska.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
We have, depending on where you live, you're either a fan of at least 4 or 5 other professional teams in New York, or 4 or 5 other professional teams in Philadelphia. You have a closet that has clothes for all of that. My wife makes fun of me because I do have that closet where it's mainly red, but it's a little green, it's a little orange and blue. There are other teams that are involved there. But those are dollars that get divided. Right? That, and that's your attention that gets divided among all those things. And in Nebraska, you are, you're red and white, and that's what you are, and that's why they sell out, and that's why all those businesses support that team, because there's only one of them, and you know how big that fan base is. We're splintered. I would love to see, we have a lot of alums that are on Wall Street now, right? That for whatever reason don't give, that aren't involved, that don't have their companies involved. That's where I think there's a lot of opportunity. There's always been opportunity from a general fundraising standpoint. There's definitely opportunity from an NIL standpoint, whether it's their companies or them as individuals. It's almost shame on them now for not getting involved. I don't care how many parking tickets they got when they were in school, or whether they got how many RU screws they got. They're the first ones to hop on the train when the team is hot and buy tickets and get back involved again and tell their buds that go to other places how cool their school is, because they're going to NCAA tournaments or going to bowl games. So
Now I want to ask you this because I know a couple other collectives have like tax deductible donations, and I know everyone wants to save as much money as possible. So
Right.
tax write-offs would be great. Is there a plan for that? And because you don't have it currently,
we looked
right?
at that at the very beginning. We went down that road, and there are a lot of limitations on money that is given to collectives with 501c3s. You are limited to only do deals of a certain size with student athletes. There are IRS implications.
Okay.
It basically becomes very limiting and a pain in the butt. And we decided very early on, when I say early on, about a year into this, that the cost benefit of we weren't going to make as much money out of it as you would think, and the amount of reporting, the amount of possibility that you can get in trouble, and the fact that the IRS really hasn't said it is totally kosher or not, made it made it really something that we just decided not to do. And if you notice, there are a bunch of others that started at other schools that are very quietly closing down because of all those reasons. So while we would love to be able to give a tax deduction, it just, the long-term sustainability, especially as this becomes more professional, like you guys were talking about in the past, our sense is, and we decided not to do that at the end of the day because of all of those factors.
Yeah, additionally, the IRS issued a clarification letter about using 501(c) status for NIL collectives and said that's not how this works. So that's in part why they're closing them down too.
And what we wanted to avoid was exactly that, right? Somebody gives a bunch of money, they end up using as a tax deduction on their tax return in year one, and then the IRS comes back and says a year later, says, you know what, you're going to have to go back and pay taxes on that.
Yep.
That's just not fair to people. We didn't want to misrepresent, and you have no idea what the IRS is going to do a year from now, so it's just easier not to do that. So we probably lose out on a certain amount of money, but at the end of the day, from a customer service standpoint and from a reporting standpoint, and also from a limitation standpoint, we just decided not to get into that.
Yeah, and I can't imagine a bigger thing that would turn somebody off than thinking they were doing the right thing, and then a year later they owe X amount of dollars.
And unfortunately, that happens anyway, whether it's NIL or not. So we just didn't want to get into that business.
Yep. We really want to thank you for joining us here. I don't have any more for you. Richie, do you have any other questions you wanted to ask for John?
I got. It's not really a question, I guess, because I know the answer to it. But I know some people have like always said on our boards, they're always like, does the little guy really matter? Do the little contributions monthly, my $10 a month, really matter when someone else has 1 to 2 big businesses? And I just want to get your thoughts on that real quick.
Yeah, I think it's really the only ways to sustain this long term. I would love it, and it's happened in the past. We've gotten a couple of, 6-figure contributions, 5-figure contributions. Those are great, and those, it's like, that gets you from point A to point B very quickly. But then that money's gone, and where do you get it again? If we could, I've always said, and we, today probably have about between 800 and 900 members. That's growing now slowly during the campaign. That gives us a certain base annually, because those are primarily either annual. People either pay their money annually, so it's a one shot, they cover the 12 months, or it's monthly, we get them money in every month. It's like anything else. It's like almost like a salary. How much money you're going to have over the course of the year if you have that base. If we had 5,000 members instead of 800 or 900 members, we would have a really big base and be able to do a lot of stuff. A school this big, with a fan base as big as it is, we should be able to do that. We're trying to find the formula that will entice people to come on. We thought at the very beginning, it's interesting, Sunil, our partner, just did a study. They represent 45 collectives around the country, so it's not only us. They work with Oklahoma, they work with LSU, they work with Syracuse. They did a survey of members at all the schools, and we get emails from folks going, I joined, where's my car magnet, right? How come you didn't send that to me? And we get that, and we do our best to fulfill. But what their survey found was people aren't joining because of car magnets. People are joining because they feel whatever money they give will allow their school to remain competitive. They like the fact that whatever money they give allows their school to make deals with players, and they see the progression. They also want benefits like, and we're in the process of doing this, discounts on swag, cool swag, high-level experiences. The Shiano shoes thing that we did, people loved that. You know, we have done, for that, we did an experience where, and it was great. The person who won brought his 70-year-old mother, who's a longtime Rutgers fan, for spending a day with the men's basketball team. And
That's
they were
cool.
treated like king and queen. They got to go to like pregame workouts. They got to spend time with players. They got to eat with players. They got treated really well. I got a personal note from his mom saying how wonderful it was. That's why people want experience and access, and they want discounts, and they want events. So we're going to be doing more of that. That's why we did the Scarlet Ticket. And that's where I think this is going. So the answer to your question is, anytime I have a way in real time to look up and see when a person becomes a $10 a month member, I celebrate that membership as much as the big stuff, because I know once they're a member, if we keep them happy, you know, we also have a 4-day-a-week email newsletter that has 3,000 subscribers now. When the more information, the more content, the more premium stuff we can give people, the more they're going to stay with us. And once we have them, that, you know, if we keep them happy, it's going to be worth it for them to keep their credit card on file with us and to make that sustainable. And it's really about building a base of money so that when you have that base, we can go back to the sports and say, okay, this year we have this amount of money for you, and that allows you to do more stuff. So even that $10 a month, you know, if you do the math, if we had 5,000 $10 a month people, and members, our base would be amazing. So it's definitely worth it. You know, people are like, we have a fan base that unfortunately always waits for, you know, the big donor. When's the big donor going to come in? You've seen those posts as well. Who's going to stroke the big check? But, you know, if you can spend the $10 a month, and I know there are some people that just don't have the ability to do that, and I understand that. But if you have the ability to do that, you know, it definitely makes a difference from our perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree, and it's the whole, you know, you could do more damage with your fist than fingers. You know, we gotta come together. We have almost 600,000 living alumni. You know, we sell out the rack every game. You know, football is close to a sellout every game. So there's the market there. We just need people to jump in the pool and, you know, stop hemming and hawing and get a friend or two. Like, that's something I've tried to do. I've kind of reached out to my Rutgers friends and said, hey, you know, it's $10 a month. You're a doctor, man. What are you doing? You run these boards. You go to every game. What are you doing? This is the minimum you could do right now to help Rutgers out, is to join KTR. And, you know, you get to go to all the events you guys have had that I've been to have been great. You know, from the beer tasting event to if you were at a certain donor level last year, you got to watch a spring practice, to this event now.
Yeah, we're planning. We haven't announced this yet. We're still working on it. We're planning on something a little bit different for the spring. We just did a partnership with the Rutgers New York City Alumni Club, where they had a watch party.
Yeah.
We were able to get 5 football players out there, and that was tough because they have to lift at 6 o'clock in the morning. So they were in the city probably till around 10. And then they took the train back. So people don't understand some of those logistics. So we really obviously those players were paid, but we really appreciate the fact that they took their time, especially this time of year when they're doing 6 a.m. lifting, to get involved with that kind of stuff. But yeah, and we have some stuff planned. And we're waiting to see if this happens. We think that the NCAA is going to further relax some of the rules as it relates to how much the athletic department can directly collaborate with us. And if they can relax those, we're hoping that we can collaborate more and team up more with the athletic department and do some things. One of the questions we always get was, how come we can't get priority points for the money that we give? You know, we get priority points when we give to the athletic department. How come we can't get priority points? Well, right now the NCAA doesn't allow that. We would love to figure out a way to partner more with the foundation on things like that, and to partner more directly with the athletic department on things that not only promote us, but promote the Rutgers experience across the board. So, you know, we're hoping that by April, we're waiting to see, there's supposed to be a further relaxation of those, especially now that the injunction has come up. It's like, there doesn't really seem to be any rules anyway, but they need to wait for the NCAA to decide that. That would be very important to us as we continue to figure out ways to work together.
Awesome. We've run through a lot of questions. We talked about a lot. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about, John, before we head out today?
No, and I really appreciate this. I think, you know, we had talked about this before we started recording. You know, we've tried to answer a lot of the questions that are the same questions over and over and over again. And we appreciate the fact that folks pay attention when they want to pay attention. The one thing I will say is, I think that we're headed in a direction that people are uncomfortable with, certain percentage of the people, but that we're headed in that direction. And if we want to stay competitive, if we want to remain, we're very fortunate to be in the Big Ten right now, because there are two conferences that are going to drive the future of football especially, but college athletics in general. And we're a member of one of them. And we need to, if we want to stay a member of that and be in that upper tier, we need to be ready to invest not only in NIL, but across the board. Because if we're not, we're going to be left behind. And that's happened to us a couple of times already. and we as sports fans, and I know a lot of people are sort of on the fence there, we as sports fans that really get excited about all of Rutgers sports don't want to be left behind again. So whether it's with us, whether it's directly to the athletic department, Alston is very important. You know, consider a way, if you're not right now, consider a way to get involved, even if it's at a very small level, because, you know, as I just said to Richie, it definitely makes a difference, and people need to understand that.
Yeah. No more Colgate.
Well, maybe in basketball.
Yeah, I didn't want to say the other school in basketball because
I know.
Bad
but, you know,
history.
they're in the same league.
Yeah,
and but Colgate is always, you know, their net rating is always better. So
true, very true.
All right, well, everybody, thanks for listening. John Newman, thanks for coming on. This has been another edition of the Night Report podcast. Signing off.